Hello, scrappers, recyclers, and investors. Welcome to Shark Scrapper Live, where we talk about all of the weird things that are going on in the world that influence our life as scrappers and recyclers. Welcome to today's show. The award goes to Cruiser Mac for the earliest person to come in to live stream. Cruiser, you don't have to come in at noon, man. Okay, we start at 2. So, you can do some other stuff instead of sitting around waiting for us to go live at 2. Gaz, welcome aboard. Scrapping Irish, always great to have you here. See you scrapping. In your honor, sir, I've got my coffee ready to go. I don't need another coffee machine, man. Sorry, man. Electronic Scrapper, great to see you here. E-Waste Mike, as always, great to have you here, man. And let's see, who else? We got Earl Fowler. We got the New England Scrapper. Hey, New England Scrapper, great to see you here, man. Wannabe Scrapper, JR a Cat. Always great to see everybody here. It is such a pleasure. Well, it has been a very interesting week. First of all, I got rid of my old chair because it kind of broke. And so I've got a new one that I picked up when I was doing an office scrap out. And I'm still kind of getting used to it. It's not quite as comfortable as the other one. It feels a little different. So not exactly sure if I'm going to keep this chair, or if I'm going to look for something else. But hey, it was free. So, what can you say? All right, we've got a busy hour ahead of us. We're going to be talking silver. We're going to be talking aluminum and the U.S. tariffs on aluminum from Russia. We've got our safety note, as always. We've got two very interesting stocks to look at today. We've got an update on the Section 230 oral arguments that were presented to the Supreme Court. And if we still have time, we're going to talk about a comment I got on one of my videos. It was an older video, but it really speaks to some of the issues associated with scrapping as a business. So without any further ado, let's get right into the silver market. Now, we see here, I'm over on the APMEX website. If you've been here for a while, you know that I like to use this to talk about what's going on with the precious metals. I also use APMEX when I am buying and selling gold and silver. This is not paid advertisement. They don't sponsor this content. I just happen to use their site, and I compare them with Kitco and a couple other sites that are out there. So, all right. So silver, we've got on the 24-hour, we can see that silver's dropping off here. And you know that I'm not a big fan of the short-term moves. So we move out to 3 days and we see, well, it's still going down. It's down 2.6%. If we look out for the week, we can see, oh my gracious, it's down 4.28%. For the month, we can see it's down 13%. What is going on? Hey, by the way, start thinking about and putting your comments in, because I am going to ask who all out there is actually trying to recover silver through scrapping. And I don't mean who stacks silver, buying coins and bars and rounds and things like that, but who is actually out there trying to recover silver as in your scrapping. All right, so on the 3-month, we see that, yeah, it's up, but look at what happened here. We came up and had a little plateau here, and then we're down. So yeah, we're up a little bit for the 3-month, but nothing great, 1% there. And then for the year to date, we're down. So if we look at the 5-year, we can see right here, we see this drop that we've been talking about. And you can see that silver had a nice run here for a while from September of 20 through May of 22. It dropped, and now it's tried to come back up, and it's dropping again. So what's going on here? Well, my read on this, and I'll be interested in what all of you think, is that silver is still traded as an investment precious metal. And people are still buying and selling silver based on the gold to silver ratio, which we can see right now. The 3-month gold to silver ratio, it's climbing back up again. It's at 86 and climbing again, which means that it takes basically 86 ounces of silver to buy gold. People have said that when it gets up in the 80s to 90s, it's a good time to buy silver because it means that it's cheap compared to gold. So I think that because silver is still treated as an investment precious metal by the markets, that the high interest rates that are out in the world right now, that are coming out in the world right now, are holding down silver market. And let's explore that a little bit. If I can get a CD or some other kind of bond or similar type of investment for 4 to 5% interest rate, why would I risk spending investment dollars on silver? Silver's not going to get me that much. That's the mindset of a lot of investors, right? They're going to go for that interest that they can get through the banks. A long-term view, and I think the view that a lot of us take in this game is that, yes, but those interest rates that the banks offer on various products are going to go up and going to go down, they're going to go up, going to go down. And in the long term, silver and gold will go up. So as we've seen, the long term here, 5-year silver is up by 23%. If we look as far back as APMEX goes, we see that back from 1994, silver is up 477%. So what I believe is going on is that the investment dollars that are out there right now are going into instruments that will give people that 4 to 5% plus that they can get CDs, bonds, and such. And so silver is hurting because of that. All right, so let's see now in the comments who here has been trying to collect silver in some way, because it's kind of interesting, right? Where do we find silver out there in the scrap world? There's certainly silver out there. So where are we going to find silver for those of us that would be interested in actually scrapping, to recover silver? I think that all of you probably immediately jump on silver contacts. Those silver contacts in switches, circuit breakers, those kind of things. As tiny little nub of silver, sometimes it's a little bigger than others. So yeah, scrapping iris, there you go, in relays. And so then the issue becomes, are you going to refine that into some grade of silver in the hopes that you can sell it? Or are you going to then try to take that collection of silver relays and stuff and sell that on to someone? CU scrapping, that's a very good option as well. Mylars off of keyboards. So silver Mylars, relatively easy scrap, really. I mean, you got a bunch of screws on a keyboard, but you get those screws out and then you get the silver Mylar. For those of you that are not terribly familiar with the silver Mylars, there's plenty of videos out there. What you're really looking for are literally the Mylars that look like silver tracing, sort of a whitish silver tracing. And then you'll get 2 sheets with the tracing and a middle sheet that'll be blank. So you separate those 2, you keep the 2 that have the silver tracing, and bam, you've got silver. Now, getting to it can be a little bit, requires some chemicals and some processing, but it's there. So silver contacts, silver Mylars, the other place you can find it, and I've seen some videos on this, but if you go to thrift stores and you look through the quote unquote silverware, the spoons, the knives for forks, sometimes those things end up, in there, they'll have silver handles and stuff like that, and they'll get through people looking for them. So if any of you go to the thrift stores and stuff like that, just take a walk down that silverware aisle and see what's there. And then, of course, there's the silver plated coffee sets and tea services and things like that are out there. So that kind of stuff is out there. If you buy that kind of stuff, you got to be really careful because you're not exactly sure what you're going to get. There are ways to look at the watermarks and stamps that are on silver items to see what kind of silver it is, and how to grade it. And then you've got to decide if you're going to take that silver or what you're going to do with it. Electronic scrapper. Yeah, I know you love doing Mylars. I've seen you do Mylars, or you've talked about doing Mylars before. I remember we were in a live stream once, and electronic scrapper. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were through the live stream. It was probably a Scrapping Irish live stream, and you were just busy moving, taking the sheets through the acid and cleaning it off. So let's see. There's silver and CD disc as well. Okay, yep. I have not tried to go after any of that, so don't know for sure. And I thought I saw, and Granny's having a beautiful spring day. I'm glad to hear that, Granny. That's awesome. So let's see. I saw a comment here. Good tip, Earl. Let's see, Earl. Here we are. Earl's developed X-ray film, good source for silver also. There you go. Yeah. So if you have access to the X-ray film, and if you know of any old photographers that have film laying around, there's a possibility there because that was part of the development process. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what goes on with silver. Like a lot of you, I have some physical silver. I do believe that gold and silver are good to have as part of your overall portfolio, because it's a hedge against inflation and such. And they're pretty. Tim Grasscutter Palmer, welcome. Welcome to the channel. Great to see you here, man. All right, so a good discussion on silver, and we'll be keeping an eye on the silver market, see where it goes. Lots of interesting stuff moving, I think, but for the time being, if the Fed keeps raising interest rates, we're not going to see anything terribly exciting happen with silver anytime fast. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about our safety topic of the day. And some of you are probably going to get a kick out of this because of a video I did recently. But I want to talk about masks. And no, I'm not going to talk about the politically charged, masking, public masking, and things like that. I'm referring to us as scrappers and recyclers wearing masks to protect ourselves from the dust and debris and the chemicals that are associated with the work that we do. And the reason why I say this is kind of funny is because a few weeks ago I had a video where I was using my grinder to cut off a section of a board, and I got so wrapped up in shooting and the angle of the shot and stuff like that I completely forgot to put my dust mask on. It was kind of you should have thought about that ahead of time, Sharky. So dust masks are a really important consideration for us. You should have them around your tools so that you can throw on your mask when you need to. The other thing that is really important with respiratory protection is chemicals. So if you're using, and we've seen Scrapping Irish frequently, he'll be doing, when he's dropping or when he's getting gold off of things, he'll put on his respirator, and then you can't hear him real well because he's got this respirator on. So you've got respirators that have activated carbon filters, which when you're breathing the air that is in the place, that the activated carbon filters out the poisons that are in the air that you're breathing so that you can keep breathing. Now, those masks work well as long as you are in an environment that still has plenty of air around you. Sometimes you need to have air assisted breathing because the environment that you're in won't have a lot of air. Probably not an issue for us, right? I mean, I don't think any of us are going to be operating in a paint booth type environment where we need to have air because there isn't enough air in the paint booth, and we're going to be sucking in, just if we just had a filtered carbon, activated carbon filter, we still wouldn't get enough air to breathe. So we probably don't need the air assisted devices, but if you are going to be working with any kind of chemicals, I would highly encourage you to get a properly fitted mask with activated carbon filter that is rated for the kind of acids that you're going to be using. They're easy enough to figure that out. It's all over the packaging, what to use, where to use it, and those kind of things. And fitting those things is pretty easy, right? You put them on your face, you cinch it down, you cover up the filter holes where the air is coming in, and then you suck in. And if it presses up against your face, then you've got a good fit. Now, beards can present a little bit of a challenge because it might pull in around the beard and not get locked up against your face as tight as it needs to be. So this, for a long time, this was an issue in the Navy, which is why the Navy then outlawed beards, because we couldn't fit the OBAs on our face properly. So if you have a beard and you fit test your mask, make sure that you've got a good tight fit so that you're not sucking in a little bit of that poisonous gas while you're working with chemicals. Otherwise, for the vast majority of us, some sort of dust protection is going to be plenty for what we do. And I'm starting to put a bunch of these by my grinder and stuff now because I find myself getting I'm setting up the shot when I'm grinding and I don't think about the dust mask, and it's no excuse. It's just, what happens sometimes. So let's see. And Mike says, Mike says, you don't have to worry about the beard issue. Oh, that's funny. Oh, man. Let's see. And Wannabe Scrapper says he's got a great deal on 3M air purifiers and helmets if you're in Canada. Yeah, okay. So if you're in Canada, reach out to Wannabe Scrapper if you need some air purifiers and helmets there. All right. So moving right along, aluminum. Aluminum. We've got I'm guessing most of you know that the United States announced that they will be imposing a tariff, 200% tariff on basically anything aluminum coming from Russia. So you've got the aluminum and the derivatives of aluminum, and you've got things that are made out of aluminum. Essentially, the United States is going to put a 200% tariff on them starting the 10th of March. And so there's, you would think that the result would be a hit, on that would drive prices up for aluminum, right? Because the tariff would arguably slow down what they could sell and drive the prices up. Well, when we go over and look at aluminum, here you can see the 24-hour aluminum prices went down, and 30-day aluminum spot prices have gone down. So there wasn't a huge impact as a result. And the commentary surrounding this actually makes a lot of sense, because the United States has historically only imported about 4.4% of the aluminum that we consume here from Russia. So there's going to be other sources where we can go to for the aluminum. And of course, the US companies like Alcoa and Century Aluminum, they're all on board with this. They like it because it means that they'll be able to sell more aluminum. And other countries have not gone out and also imposed a similar tariff. So other countries will still be buying Russian aluminum. Um, so these can have some, it's not having a huge impact on the price of aluminum. If we look at the longer term trends for aluminum, we can see, I like to look at these long term trends. So we go to the 1 year aluminum spot price, and we can see we had this drop in early 22, and it's kind of from about June, July of 22 through the current. It's kind of bounced up and down, but not a whole lot has happened. It's kind of moving sideways. And then if we look at the 5 year with aluminum, that sort of sideways thing is even more evident. Oops, especially when you use a great big arrow. So you can see the sideways kind of, you got some of this is below the bar, some of it's above the bar. So not a whole lot going on. And why would that be? Well, what's really happening here is that the aluminum consumption really hasn't gotten back on foot. China isn't fully opened up. They're starting to open up again. So they're not using aluminum the way they were before. So there's, as aluminum, as the marketing, as the production, as the use of aluminum starts to slowly ramp back up again, we should see some prices start to come back. But the other thing I like to look at, and that is what's going on with the inventory levels. So here's the London Metal Exchange aluminum warehouse, and you can see that it's starting to increase on the 30-day level. We see on the 60-day, well, this is what we just saw. Here's the warehouse levels increasing again. And if you look at the 6 month, what you kind of get the feeling of is here, let me draw this line here. So you can see that it's like, well, they use some, they stock some up and it gets drawn down. It gets to a certain point and they start stocking it back up again. If we go look at the long term, here's the 5-year London Metal Exchange aluminum warehouse. And we can clearly see that aluminum warehouse inventories are on the rise. So they're going to slowly stock up the warehouse inventories. That's going to keep prices somewhat abated as consumption could still pick up. But if they're also putting more in, then are we really affecting the price that much? My gut feeling is we're not going to see a whole lot of movement in aluminum prices. I'd like to know what you think. So go ahead and drop some comments down there. What do you think is going to happen with aluminum here in the next few? I'm looking for comments on aluminum. Oh, Silver Scorpion's got to run later on, man. Take care. Nice of you to drop by. Right. So what's going on with aluminum? Anybody want to guess on pricing for aluminum? So we had a comment early here. Wannabe Scrapper said, why just aluminum? That was the latest round, Wannabe Scrapper. There are other tariffs that the U.S. imposed a year ago when the war started, that the EU has imposed. There have been various, tariffs and restrictions placed on a lot of the goods that are coming out of Russia, as well as what can be sold into Russia. So that's just the latest round as they try to turn the heat up. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other comments on aluminum. Aluminum for us in recycling and scrapping, we see it all the time. Cast aluminum, sheet aluminum. And it's funny to me how many yards have so many different kind of categories for aluminum. So for instance, the yard that I go to for my non-ferrous, they just put all cast in one, cast aluminum, cast zinc, cast pot metal. It's just all called cast aluminum. Now we know that is different, and we know how to look for it using a dilute solution of ZEP root killer. But for some reason, my yard just throws it all in the same bin, and buys it that way. And I'm assuming that means they sell it that way, because it's not like they're going to go through that bin and separate it before they sell it to somebody. So I find that really interesting. And the other interesting thing about aluminum is, of course, you've got extruded aluminum, cast aluminum, sheet aluminum. Those are just processes that are used to make things out of aluminum. Aluminum itself is alloyed with materials to make it achieve different levels of hardness, brittleness, workability. And so the different aluminum alloys are what we really ought to be interested in. But how would any of us know how to identify a particular aluminum alloy? Sometimes there will be a stamp on the material that will give you some indication of what the material is. But a lot of times, we don't know. And I think that's why the scrap yards just separated by the process: sheet, cast, extruded, because the process then suggests the particular alloy of aluminum that's used in order to achieve what the end state is. So I can only assume that's why a scrapyard categorizes it like that, because that's the easy way for everybody to identify it, right? But it was interesting because when I had the cell phone tower company next to me, some of you may recall this video, I got these big chunks of aluminum from them. And I noticed that they had like an ALSI number. And that's because that particular aluminum alloy had silicon in it. So it was really interesting to kind of dive into, why that particular alloy was used extensively in that market. But when I called up the scrapyard and said, hey, is this priced any different than what I normally bring in as cast aluminum? Yeah, they said, yeah, no, it's just throw it in with the cast. So, oh man. CU Scrappings is responding to a comment by the New England Scrapper. Okay, here we are. New England Scrapper says, and then there's the yards that throw all aluminum into one bin. Yep. And here we've got Wannabe says his yard throws die cast in with aluminum. Yep, that's the same thing my yard does. And New England Scrapper says, yeah, then there's the yards like mine that buy all aluminum for one price, and then they sort it into different bins back in their warehouse to sell it. Okay. Yep, that's one way to do it. Man, New England Scrapper, I would love to be able to afford to do that. So yeah, that's going to be a little while. Yeah, maybe I should start a GoFundMe, the Shark Scrapper XRF GoFundMe account. Probably take us, 20 years to get enough money to do that. Oh man. So New England, do they make you sort it out, or do they? So I'm not sure if the question was intended for me or for somebody else in the chat. But my non-ferrous yard wants me to separate it by sheet, cast, and extruded. And it's funny because sometimes I get into this discussion with the buyer about extruded, because he'll call something sheet because in his mind, what he uses is if it's got a square corner on any one of the bends, then it's extruded because there's no way that was a sheet that was folded. And my argument to him is, yeah, but you can extrude a lot of aluminum things that are circular, tubes and things like that. They're going to have round corners. Fortunately, he and I know each other really well. We like each other. We can have that discussion and figure out what makes sense for what I'm selling to him. So that kind of goes back to having a good relationship with your scrapyard people so that when you do have those kind of questions, you can talk through what makes sense, right? And in the case of a lot of aluminum tubing, it's not like they're going to take a sheet of aluminum and roll it and then weld it to make a tube out of it. If they did, you would probably see a weld mark of some sort. So it's an interesting discussion about the way the yards separate them. Franklin E-Waste, welcome. My yard tried to give me sheet aluminum price for everything. It's good to know, and Franklin, does that yard advertise different prices for extruded and cast, and then try to give you just sheet, or do they only have the one price? Let's see. Oh, Wannabe Scrapper says he'll kick in $1 or $2 for the XRF gun. Cool, man. Appreciate it. I'll get right on that. Oh man. That was for New England Scrapper. Okay, man. All right, no worries. No worries. Raffle Scrapper, welcome aboard. Great to have you here, sir. How was dinner tonight? Franklin says they lowballed me on everything. That's rough. Some yards try to play that game, other yards don't. So it's unfortunate that your yard is playing that game with you. All right, so that's been a good discussion of aluminum. We're not exactly sure, of course. We'll have to keep an eye on aluminum, but I just keep taking it in. As I get it, I'm taking it in and selling it. I'm hanging on to a little bit of aluminum because I might do some melt projects with it, but I'm not really keeping a lot of aluminum behind the way I am copper. What aluminum I am keeping behind is just so I can play around with melting it at some point. Raffle Scrapper says his dinner was awesome and he's fighting to try to not fall asleep. Well, I hope that you're trying to, that's because you got too much food in your belly. Nothing wrong with falling asleep with too much food in your belly. All right, so we've got some interesting stocks to look at today. And I think you're going to find these kind of interesting. Anyway, big names that you've probably heard of a lot of. So anyway, remember, as we go into the stock market discussion, all of the data that I get on the dollar values, the data comes from the Value Line Investment Survey. This site does not take any advertising dollars. So all of the information is just straight data and analysis of data without any bias towards the advertisers. I like that because it gives me confidence in the data that I am therefore using either for my own investments or to share with all of you. Again, this is not a paid advertisement. I am not compensated by them in any way. I just use them and I like their product. I am also not a financial advisor, so all of this is just information on the way that I analyze a stock. And if you want to use it, great. And if you don't, that's up to you. I highly encourage you to think through whatever you're going to do when it comes to your financial future and your investment strategies, and if necessary, consult with a licensed financial professional. Okay, we got that out of the way so nobody can sue me. So our stocks today, some really cool names out there. The first one we're going to look at, ExxonMobil. Yes, we're going into the petroleum stocks. Now, this is kind of fun because talk about heated positions. Here we are. You've got some people that like to recycle because they want to do good for the planet. You have other people that recycle because, well, they're trying to make some money at it. Other people are doing the scrapping and recycling because it's a fun hobby. And so the oil industries are one of those, hot touch points. People love them, people hate them. Again, this discussion is purely from a business perspective. All right. So this is purely as a stock perspective here. So we start out with ExxonMobil, ticker XOM. They are throwing off a 3.1% yield, which is below the 4% that I would normally like to see, but they have been much higher in the past. So this is just a result of where things stand right now, and that's on a share price of $117.80. That's US dollars, by the way. So this is a pretty expensive stock. And man, if a person wasn't already in this stock, they'd be hard pressed to make a decision to go in right now, especially if it was just for the dividends. But we do the analysis that I like to do, and what we can see is that, let's scoot this over. What we can see is that they are not qualified for cash flow per share because they got all these drops. They're not qualified by earnings per share because they got all these drops, but they are qualified in dividends per share because the 17 years, actually longer than 17 years, by the way, but for the last 17 years, they have increased dividends per share every year. So they are what we call a Div 0. And if we look at that graphically, it gets kind of interesting because you see here's the cash flow, the earnings, and at one point the earnings per share dipped below what they were paying out in dividends. So I bet you that was an interesting time in the board meetings back here. All right, so the next company that we're going to look at is also one of the petroleum giants, and this one is Chevron. Now, the reason I picked these two is because they're both very large. They're also the only two of the petroleum companies that actually pass my test. And again, Chevron, like ExxonMobil, is a Div 0. Oops. So it is a Div 0 and did not pass on cash flow or earnings. They are yielding 3.5%, and that's on $171.01. So Chevron X. Now, give you an idea of the other companies that were studied that are in the Value Line Investment Survey: BP, CVR Energy, Synovus, Delek, HF, Sinclair, Hess, Imperial, Marathon, Murphy, Occidental Petroleum, BPF, Petroleum, Phillips 66, Shell, Suncor, Total Energies, and Valero. None of the others are qualified through my process. So it gives you an idea of the volatility that goes on in this industry. But you see, these are pretty closely related to each other. So kind of, you would say, well, let's compare the two. Let's turn off the dot first and then compare the two. There we go. So here's Chevron, ExxonMobil. You've got both of them are Div 0s. Here's the yield, 3.5 for Chevron, the 3.1 for Exxon, and their prices per share. What are you going to do? That graphic doesn't really do a whole lot to help you. But when we go down here and we look at the cash flow per share, we can see that Chevron always seems to be doing a little better than ExxonMobil. So then we're going to go down and look at the earnings per share, and we see that Chevron, well, they kind of do better than ExxonMobil, except back in here they struggled a bit, and now they've got their act back together again. And if we look at the dividends per share, here we can see that Chevron does outperform ExxonMobil, paying out. And this is the actual dollar value of the dividend per share. So interesting, if you're looking to get into the big petroleum companies, by the way, the Value Line Investment Survey refers to this as petroleum integrated industry. There's if you're doing it for the investments, the two that are qualified by my criteria for the dividends are the big names, and they're pretty expensive to get into. So kind of a challenge to get in at these kind of prices for a lot of people, and those dividends really aren't that great. So I don't really know if that's a good way to go in for a lot of folks right now. Yeah, I'm gonna hold off. Now I as I have always promised to do, I will admit that I own shares in both companies that I bought many, many years ago and have just held on to, but I'm not buying anything new. It's just whenever the dividends pay out, they automatically roll over into some more. And so that's the only way that I'm acquiring right now. Everyday Sellers, welcome to the stream. Great to see you here, lady. Glad you could make it. Earl Fowler, let's see, Earl, you're talking, let's see, Earl says APA Corp, which is Apache Oil in the US, is also a good stock. Oh, let's see, Earl, I'm gonna have to look. I will try to, let's see here real quick, Earl, if they are analyzed and in the Value Line Investment Survey. APA, Apache Oil. So one of the things that's really cool is with every week when I get the investment survey, I get the index because things can change around a lot. So we can go in here and we can see if Apache is one of the ones that I don't see Apache Oil listed in the survey. So they are not analyzing Apache Oil, so I won't be able to do a comparison for you. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I don't see him in the listing, so sorry, I will not be able to do a comparison for you, at least not on this data. All right, so okay, so let me get rid. All right, so that's those stocks. Hopefully you found that interesting and somewhat provocative for the oil industry. An update on the 230 findings. So remember last week we talked about the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court was going to hear arguments in a couple of cases, the big one being Gonzalez versus Google, where Gonzalez family was suing Google for claiming that the Google algorithm motivated people to become terrorists that then went on and killed one of their family members, their daughter. And their argument that they were putting forward was that even though Section 230 of the U.S. Code shields the internet companies from liability, because they say, hey, Ian, welcome to the stream, man. Great to see you here. Even though Section 230 shields internet companies from third-party content, the stuff that you and I put up, what I'm putting up right now in this live stream, the Gonzalez family was saying that because there's an algorithm that promotes material in front of people, that therefore companies like Google are responsible when or liable when bad things happen because of the information that was pushed to certain people. So the U.S. Supreme Court was taking oral arguments this week. Now, I was not in the room. I mean, they don't let just Joe Blows wander in sometimes. But the news reports that have come out of the arguments suggest that the Supreme Court is not exactly excited about the idea of overturning the Section 230 protections for these companies. A number of the justices made comments about where do you draw the line? If the algorithm decides that you like cooking and it gives you a whole bunch of cooking videos instead of videos on how to knit socks, well, that's no harm, no foul, nobody cares. But because the algorithm pushed content that was of a terrorist organization to people that were interested in that kind of information, does that now make them responsible for what those terrorists do? Is that any different than somebody who got cooking content and made bad food and poisoned someone? That's just me, by the way. Nobody in the news world said that. That's just me extrapolating on those comments. So it was an interesting back and forth. Some of the other justices just sort of pretty much admitted that they're not the right people to be making this decision. First of all, you got 9 people who they have spent their lives understanding the law, not technology, and what would happen if they upended these protections to the internet. They have no way to make those kind of decisions. They don't know what the results would be. And so there's also the sense that this should get pushed to lawmakers, Congress and the Senate and stuff, to work on what makes the most sense. So the sense of the news that has come out from the oral arguments is that the Supreme Court is probably not going to find in favor of the Gonzalez family, although it's going to be months before we get that answer, most likely. Just the way the questioning went, the comments that were made by the judges probably is not going to be a big point. Franklin, that's fascinating. I understand protections for third parties, but pushed content is promoted, which is different. But that's the point that they're making. So the 230 protects Section 230 protects the internet platform from the material that third parties put up there, right? So it's not necessarily protecting the people that put the content up there. Although, when you live in a developed nation that supports and promotes free speech, you've got all kinds of back and forth about what's the extent of free speech, what's allowed free speech. That's a whole different argument. What Section 230 does is it says that Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, they are not responsible for the content that somebody else has put up. And then what the Gonzalez family and other people are arguing is, yes, but if the algorithm is promoting that content, then they are responsible. And the judges are not, it just seems like the judges aren't agreeing with that argument. I find it fascinating, like you do, Franklin, because I can see the argument going on either side. I could see both sides of that argument. So I'm not really sure where I come down on this. But the other part of that is that what Google, especially Google, is saying is that, look, if we didn't have these algorithms to sort and organize and bin and categorize all this stuff, it would just be insane. Nobody would be able to find the information that they're really looking for. So you've got that part of it as well. Let's see, what else? 9 older people that don't understand tech. Well, and it's funny because, basically that's what a lot of people are saying. It's like, these people don't understand tech. I don't think it's so much an age thing, though, Franklin, as much as they're lawyers, right? They're judges. They spent their entire life trying to understand the law and not understand technology. So I think there's a little bit of a difference there, but it's kind of the point there is that these people understand law, they don't understand technology. Let's see, everyday solars. Internet companies would fold if a case like that set precedents. However, more needs to be done, put the companies to find and remove harmful content. Solars, in my soul, I agree with what you're saying, but it comes down to the challenge of what's harmful content, what's free speech. And that's where things get really, get in that messy gray area. It's a tough one, a real tough one. It's because who am I to decide what is right and wrong? Who are any of us to decide what is right and wrong? And when you're in the world of free speech, that's where these things come down on. That it's tough, and I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you, but it's hard. It's messy. Ian says, I'm old and don't understand tech, but my 8-year-old niece does. Oh, I guess you mean you're old. So yeah, well, it's good to have young people in the family to help you figure stuff out, Ian. But Ian, you sell yourself short. I think you know more than you let on. I really do. Yeah, it's tricky. It really is tricky. Absolutely. Let's see. Franklin says, creating a tech Supreme Court from people with zero ownership or holdings of big tech. So are you saying a court that would adjudicate these kind of decisions that are people that don't have any interest in? That could be interesting. That would be an interesting way to adjudicate that, because right now each one of the companies is sort of making those decisions themselves. In fact, Section 230 actually addresses the question here. Let's see. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Let's see. I don't have it on this information sheet that I printed out, but there is, within Section 230, there is part of it that protects companies for I think they refer to it as their Good Samaritan efforts, or their efforts. That it basically says that the provider can articulate what is acceptable and then filter content based on what they have deemed is, you can't put such and such up if you're going to be on our platform. And they're protected and allowed to do that as well. So there is some of that protection so that they can filter out stuff that is particularly violent or harmful, and they're protected to allow them to do that. Correct. If law is a language interpreted and argued by lawyers, then code follows the same logic. Yeah, interesting. Man, I hated coding. When I was getting my master's in oceanography and physical meteorology, we had to learn how to code. I'm not going to tell you what language we had to learn because some of you would laugh your butts off, but that was the programming language of the day. And I hated coding. Oh, God, I hated coding. But in that world of the geophysical sciences, we had to use supercomputers. We had to understand how the models worked. And in order to understand how the models worked, you had to understand the code that was driving the models. So yeah, that was a tough one. I did not like those courses at all. Hey, Miss Canadian Scraper, how you doing? Great to see you. How's the weather up there? You and Cruiser Mac, are you all chilling out up there? Let's see, JR Cat, the more you let on, the more work they give you. Oh, that must have been a comment from somebody. You must be following up on a cruiser from somebody else. On a comment from somebody else. Franklin, MS-DOS. I'm not gonna tell you. Yeah, no, not gonna tell you. So, oh, here's one that I hadn't seen before. Somebody saying the red light 34. Welcome. I love e-waste scrapping. Yes, it is a lot of fun. We all have a blast doing it. It's why a lot of us are here. And this is a place to talk about things that are going on around the world. Let's see. Miss Canadian Scrapper, it's not too bad today. I'm sorry, but when you Canadians say it's not too bad today, there's a you got to define this, okay? Cruiser Mac is saying snow and cold, same old, same old. When I was in the Navy and I was forecasting weather for the Navy, I used to have to remind people frequently that what they consider good weather and what I consider good weather, two very different things. To me, a hurricane, a tropical cyclone, man, that's good weather, right? I mean, that's really good weather. But for military operations, it's not necessarily good weather. So, yeah, you guys got to be, you Canadians need to be a little more, clear when you say good weather or not bad. Like JCT is saying 82 degrees in paradise. There you go. Beautiful, sunny, nice and warm. Hey, I want to get to a comment that one of my viewers left for me on one of my older videos. So we're going to go pop over here for just a minute. Hopefully you can see this comment. It was made by Matt D. He said, a critical piece of information is left out. How long did it take to do all the legwork, break it all down, sell $200 worth of scrap? We need to know this so we can tell if scrapping PCs is actually be profitable, or is it more of a hobby where time isn't a factor? Now, this particular video that Matt D is referring to is one of my older videos where I was talking about what's valuable inside a PC and how to break down the PC and get at the stuff that's inside of the PC. And I wanted to highlight this particular comment because it's one of the things that I try to address in my series, my return on investment series, is time. When you're in the business of scrapping, time becomes a very important element. And scrapyards deal with this stuff all the time, right? What do they want to deal with? What do they want their employees to be focused on and working on to bring the most return to their yard? And we that are small-time scrapping businesses, man, we deal with it in spades. Because, if I'm breaking down one thing for $10 an hour, that means that something that might be earning me $50 an hour is not getting attended to. Whereas if you are a hobbyist and you are just killing time, well, then in some sense, you want it to take as long as it possibly can because that's what you want. You're just spending time doing it. And if you can make a few extra dollars and take up the rest of your day doing it, then, that's fine as a hobbyist. So I really want to stress that when you see my videos where I'm talking about the return on investment of scrapping, it's not saying that you shouldn't do something, because all of us are doing this for very different reasons. But the point is to help you understand what your time value is on certain types of scrap. And then there's also people come up with shortcuts that can let them get through things faster and therefore put more value into what it is they're scrapping. So it's really important to think to yourself, okay, am I a hobbyist or am I doing this for a business? And I mean, really, if you're a business, the math is very different. And I don't mean, there's a lot of hobbyists who will say they're doing it as a business because they're making money, but that's not technically a business. A business being you've registered with your state, your county, your country, whatever is required where you're located as a legitimate business. You have the insurance and the licenses and the certifications if they're required, those kind of things, because that's when time becomes such an important factor. And when you're a hobbyist, man, just have fun doing it, right? It's as a hobbyist, because I used to do this as a hobby. And for me, you'll see in some of my older videos back before I became a business where I was breaking down everything. I mean, I was taking oscillators off the boards and the whole deal, right? So it's a very, very different perspective. And all of them are correct depending upon you and your reasons for doing it. So please keep that in mind and understand that nobody can tell you that you're wasting time, that you're not doing it right, that you shouldn't be doing that, because it's all about what's right for you, either as a hobbyist or as a scrapper. And the only thing that I try to convey in the ROI is, here's what it's worth, so you have some informed decision making. And the only time that I would say that somebody has a right to tell you that something you're doing is wrong is if it's going to kill you or kill somebody else. So keep that one tucked away in the back of your mind. All right, folks, I have had another wonderful day with everybody. We are going to get ready to hop over to Scrapping Irish's live stream. If you have autoplay enabled, when I end this broadcast, you will automatically be redirected over to Scrapping Irish's live stream. If you do not have autoplay enabled, you may get a link or a suggestion or something like that. Regardless of how you do it, I look forward to seeing all of you over on Scrapping Irish's live stream. Have a wonderful day, and we're going to head on over there.